The Pro Bowl used to have undeniable aura, and today we're going to walk through exactly how it transformed from a football game where the best in the league went head to head into a flag football game where the only thing getting hit is the open bar after the game. Before we get into what exactly killed the aura of the Pro Bowl, you have to understand how the league looked when it first started. The first All-Star game happened in January of 1939 at Wrigley Field in LA. 15,000 football fans showed up, and the format was a little bit different compared to the Pro Bowl that we would see in later years. In this format, the champions of the league actually played against a team of all-stars from all the other teams. And honestly, I think that's a pretty sick setup. They ran with this format for a few years and it quickly became something that fans really looked forward to. Attendance numbers kept going up and the games were competitive, but unfortunately, World War II would put a stop to its upward trajectory. After Pearl Harbor, the government put travel restrictions in place that made it nearly impossible to move players across the country for a game that wasn't even essential. The NFL was already barely surviving with a reduced schedule, losing players to military service left and right, so an all-star game was the last thing on anybody's mind. And by 1943, the game would actually be discontinued. The game would remain missing for almost a decade until Commissioner Bert Bell would bring it back in 1951. And this time, they dropped that original format from before. Instead of champions versus all-stars, it was conference against conference. The first modern Pro Bowl was played at the Los Angeles Coliseum, and it ended up being a massive event because 53,000 people showed up. Due to its success, for the next 20 years, the league decided to keep this format going. The game stayed in LA, and the crowds kept getting bigger, and players genuinely wanted to be there to prove themselves against the other best players in the league. Getting selected to the Pro Bowl was a legitimate honor. Jim Brown made it every single year of his career for 9 straight selections, and he showed up to every single one. Gale Sayers won MVP 3 times, and because his Bears never made it to the playoffs, the Pro Bowl ended up being the only postseason game that he ever got to participate in, and he called it the place where you got to prove how good you really were against the best of your peers. Then in 1970, the AFL and NFL merger happened, and the Pro Bowl took on a whole new meaning. I'm sure you already know the history, but just in case you don't, the AFL was a rival league that started in 1960 specifically to compete with the NFL. And for 10 years, these two leagues were at war with each other. They were fighting over players, fighting over TV deals, and of course, fighting over fans. The NFL looked at the AFL like a bunch of pretenders, and the AFL had a massive chip on their shoulder because of it. And when they finally merged, the Pro Bowl became the place where they settled it with the AFC against the NFC. And as you already may have guessed, these games were extremely physical. Here's just one example to prove a point. In one Pro Bowl, Jack Youngblood played with a broken fibula, and that was the same broken leg that he played through in the Super Bowl just 2 weeks earlier. Nobody made him do that. He just wanted to compete and show the other half of the league what he was made of. That's just the kind of mentality that the players had back then. But this mentality would slowly start to shift starting in 1980 when they moved the Pro Bowl to Hawaii. Before we get to the rest of the video, here's a quick word from today's sponsor. The other day I had an eye twitch, and instead of talking to a real professional, I did what I always do. I started Googling my symptoms on my phone at 2 a.m. And of course, the internet convinced me that I had 2 weeks to live. And that's when I realized I had a problem. Not the eye twitch, that went away. The problem is that I will do literally anything to avoid booking a doctor's appointment. The main reason that I avoid booking is because I hate the process. I hate calling the office and being put on hold and then having to explain my hemorrhoid situation to a receptionist. Not only that, but it can be really time consuming to try and find somebody that's in network who will see me sooner than 3 months from now. But thanks to ZocDoc, today's sponsor, I never have to go through that again. ZocDoc is a free website where you can find and book in-network doctors without having to call anybody. They have over 150,000 providers across all 50 states that you can read verified patient reviews for and book in minutes. Don't be like me and let the internet diagnose all of your problems. Go to ZocDoc.com/Troybert to find and book a doctor today. Link will be in the description. Now back to the video. On paper, this seemed like a great idea, and I still think that it was a great idea. The game had been bouncing around to different cities for years, and nobody could really figure out where it truly belonged. Commissioner Pete Rozelle thought that moving the game to Honolulu would make the Pro Bowl feel more like a reward to the best players that the league had to offer. What he didn't realize was that by turning the trip into a vacation, he may have inadvertently started to kill the competitive nature that made the game special. Players, of course, started showing up to Hawaii with their entire families, and they were hitting up the beach, playing golf, and enjoying the resort lifestyle. The game itself started to become a secondary inconvenience that they had to get through before they could go back to relaxing. And once that mentality set in, it spread very fast. By the late 80s and the early 90s, it was rumored that there was a gentleman's agreement that had formed among players. Nobody was going to tackle hard, nobody was going to risk getting hurt, and ball carriers started running out of bounds instead of fighting for extra yards. Defenders would grab jerseys and let go instead of actually bringing the guys down, and famously, former tight end Todd Christensen, who played in 5 Pro Bowls, said that he could smell the Mai Tais in the huddle. I'll let you decipher exactly what he meant by that. The AFC-NFC rival that had fueled the competition in the 70s was quickly fading. The guys who had actually played in the rival leagues were retiring, and the new generation of players didn't have that same level of animosity because they had no memory of the war between the AFL and the NFL. To them, the conference distinction was just a jersey color. There was nothing personal about it anymore. And as the years went on, the product on the field reflected that. Every year, the games got sloppier and sloppier, and the effort diminished. But the real rock bottom of the Pro Bowl came in 2012. The AFC beat the NFC 59-41, and the fans at Aloha Stadium were actively booing because of how little effort the players were actually giving. The Associated Press described players hitting each other like they were in a pillow fight. And Aaron Rodgers, who was the reigning MVP at the time, said after the game that some of his teammates embarrassed themselves out there. Deion Sanders actually went one step further and confirmed how deep that gentleman's agreement actually went when he tweeted after the 2012 game that all of the linemen had cut deals with each other to go easy, and other players had followed suit. Because the backlash was so bad, Roger Goodell finally said something. He went on ESPN radio and admitted that this wasn't the kind of football that the league wanted to showcase. And he actually threatened to eliminate the game entirely if things didn't improve. For a split second, it seemed like the league might implement some changes, try and improve the quality of the game for the fans. But instead, they panicked and started throwing ideas at the wall. Which is why in 2014, the league actually scrapped the entire idea of AFC versus NFC and replaced it with this weird fantasy draft where 2 Hall of Famers would pick teams like it was recess. One year it was Jerry Rice versus Deion Sanders, and another year it was Michael Irvin versus Chris Carter. And the main idea was that mixing up the rosters would create new matchups and make things interesting once again. As we all know, it did not work at all, and viewership continued to plummet. The games were still sloppy, and the effort was absolutely embarrassing. By 2016, the league gave up on that experiment completely and just went back to AFC versus NFC. Unfortunately, that didn't fix the viewership issues. The rate of players withdrawing from the game completely continued to rise, and the viewership kept plummeting. Which is why in 2022, the league finally admitted what everybody already knew. The traditional Pro Bowl as we used to know it was completely done for. The NFL scrapped the Pro Bowl completely and replaced it with the Pro Bowl games, which we have today. Now the Pro Bowl week is just a skills competition with a flag football game tacked at the end of it. Even with the lowered expectations, the product has gotten worse every single year. In 2023, it pulled 6.2 million viewers, and in 2025, it hit an all-time low, only pulling 4.7 million viewers. Roger Goodell has said repeatedly that he doesn't see the game ever going back to tackle football, and honestly, I think he's probably right. But the question still remains, why did it have to get this bad? You can blame the move to Hawaii, you can blame the gentleman's agreement, you can blame Roger Goodell because it's just more fun to blame Roger Goodell. To me, the real reason why the Pro Bowl died is much simpler than that. For the players, the money just stopped making sense. In 1971, the winning team got $2,000 per player, and when you adjust that for inflation, that's about $15,000 in today's money. Back then, the average NFL salary was only around $25,000 per year, so that $2,000 was a pretty nice bonus. If we look at today, the winning team gets $92,000 per player, which sounds like a lot more until you realize that someone like Patrick Mahomes makes $156,000 per day. The payout for the Pro Bowl is less than what he earns while he sleeps. For a guy like that, risking an injury for $92,000 is like you or me risking a car accident by stopping our car on the freeway to try and pick up a $20 bill that's in the middle of the road. The math just doesn't really work out. And things start to make a lot more sense when you start to look at the contract incentives. Teams love to put Pro Bowl bonuses in players' contracts because it sounds good during negotiations. But here's something that you've probably never heard. In the 2024 season, there were 126 Pro Bowl clauses worth a combined $47 million. And do you know how many players actually collected that bonus? Out of the 126 potential bonuses, only 4 players actually collected. The other 122 players either didn't make the roster, or they did make it and decided not to show up because participating wasn't worth their time. Since 2016, there have been years where around 40% of the Pro Bowl roster players actually passed on showing up to the game, which is how we've ended up in situations like we have now, where someone like Shedeur Sanders ends up making the Pro Bowl. And that's no shade at Shedeur. I'd go too if I was offered, but he only started 7 games, and I think we can all agree that his performances probably weren't Pro Bowl worthy. The Pro Bowl selection used to mean something on your resume. It used to be a kind of accolade that helped guys make it into the Hall of Fame. And now, for better or for worse, it's kind of just a participation trophy for whoever bothers to show up. By the way, this isn't just an NFL problem. The NBA All-Star Game has had declining viewership for years, and the only league that I'm aware of that's been able to turn this trend around has been the NHL when they turned their All-Star Game into the Four Nations Face-Off, and they went from pulling 1.4 million viewers to 9.3. Unfortunately, I think that this is just the price of success. When leagues get rich enough and players start making generational wealth, all-star games just stop being attractive to them. Now, I want to be clear that I didn't make this video to call the current players soft or say that they should be playing hard in a Pro Bowl where they go balls to the wall. I don't think that at all, and if I was in their shoes, I'd be doing the same exact thing. The actual reason I made this video is because I was watching Sean Taylor highlights, and that hit that he laid on Brian Moorman in the Pro Bowl got me so pumped up that I just couldn't get it out of my head. If you're wondering if I'll be tuning into the Pro Bowl games this year, the answer is yes. There's only 2 weeks left of the football season, so I'm going to take everything that I can get. Let me know down in the comments if you missed the Pro Bowl, and if you do miss the Pro Bowl, what was your favorite Pro Bowl moment? If you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy one of my other videos, which I put on screen right here. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.